All right, sending it. Hello, people of YouTube land, and those that are part of the Crunch Crew Community Gaming Discord, those that follow Ted and I on Twitch, and those that are listening on Spotify or whatever audio streaming place that we put this on, and whatever this gets put on. Else, I am Traductus.
And I'm Ted.
And this is the Crunch Crew Gaming Movie Review Podcast, where we take a director's filmography and we review all the films. And we are right now doing Tarantino with his second movie, Pulp Fiction. Okay, so obviously we're going to go background, and then Ted's going to give you the plot, and then we're going to go likes and dislikes. Obviously directed by Quentin Tarantino. This was released in 1994. Making this, I don't think that this is this is still an independent fucking movie. Okay. But distributed by Miramax, but anyway, released May 21st, 1994 at the Cannes Film Festival, and then released in the United States October 14th, 1994. Had a budget of $8 to $8.5 million and had a box office return of $213.9 million.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, that is a damn good profit.
That's fucking nuts.
Yeah. Now, this isn't completely written by Tarantino. He co-wrote it. This was also wrote by Roger Avery, who wrote The First Element of this in 1990, and they were going to write it as a short, thinking it would be easier to get made than a feature. However, they found out that nobody produces shorts, so the film ended up becoming a trilogy with one was going to be by Tarantino, the other one's going to be by Avery, and there was going to be a third person by a third director, but that never materialized, so they just ended up just each of them expanded their section into a fuck, what was I going to say?
Like anthology, kind of?
Yeah, into a feature film, which this is, I guess, technically an anthology. But part of there is a part of this movie was originally written for the movie True Romance, but ended up being used in this. I'm not sure which part, since I have yet to see it while scrolling through, so I think we're just gonna go through cast. Which first we'll have John Travolta as Vincent Vega. Originally this was supposed to be Michael Madsen, who played Vic Vega in Reservoir Dogs. However, he wasn't able to be in this movie since he chose to appear in Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp, and Madsen has expressed regret over that decision. Harvey Weinstein also pushed for Daniel Day-Lewis in the part. However, John Travolta accepted a reduced rate, with sources either saying that he was paid $100,000 or $140,000. And this film's success actually gave him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor and revived his career. Fun fact, that comes to, I guess, my sort of history with this movie. My mom actually said this is the first John Travolta movie with John Travolta in it that she actually liked. Which makes sense if you think back, like in like the late 70s and throughout the 80s, you know, Saturday Night Fever, which is a good movie, but like John Travolta seems like back in those days casted for more of his looks than his acting ability. And usually like in like a corny comedy or like a really, really corny, hammy, like dramatic film. And this is kind of where he becomes more or less considered to be a serious actor. We also have Samuel L. Jackson as Jules Winfield. Now, Jackson almost didn't get the role. His first audition was overshadowed by an actor by the name of Paul Calderon. However, and the reason why is because Samuel L. Jackson thought the audition was merely a reading, and then one of the Weinstein brothers convinced him to audition a second time, and his performance of the final diner scene is what won over Tarantino. Originally, Jules was supposed to be scripted with a giant afro, but Tarantino's personal assistant accidentally got a jerry curled jerry curled wig. I am
Nailing it.
nailing it. Yes. And Tarantino was pissed. However, Samuel Jackson persuaded him to keep the hairstyle because it gained popularity through the group NWA. Wow, instead of a counter, this should be me flubbing over words.
I don't know. The counter's climbing there too, man. I'm happy we brought it back.
Yeah. Now, originally, Tarantino wrote this role for Lawrence Fishburne, who turned it down because Fishburne's like team did not see it as a starring role. Lawrence Fishburne ended up saying that he actually turned down the role because he felt the film glamorized heroin. We have Uma Thurman as Mia Wallace. She apparently dominated the film's promotional material, and other actors that were considered for the role were Holly Hunter or Meg Ryan. Other actresses were also Alfre Woodward, who I don't know who she is, and then Meg Tilly. But as soon as Tarantino met Uma Thurman, this ended up as soon as he met Uma Thurman, it was like, you know, right away. And she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, and this movie launched her into A-list celebrity, even though she didn't choose to do any big budget films until Batman and Robin in 1997. Jesus Christ. We also have Harvey Keitel as Winston Wolfe, Tim Roth as Ringo, Amanda Plummer as Yolanda, Ving Rhames as Marcellus Wallace, Eric Stoltz as Lance, Rosanna Arquette as Jody, who is Eric Stoltz's character's wife, and she was almost cast. I mean, not Rosanna Arquette, but like the Pam Grier was almost cast as Jody for the role, but Tarantino did not believe that audiences would find it plausible for Eric Stoltz to yell at Pam Grier. But Tarantino did later cast Pam Grier as the lead role in Jackie Brown. Apparently, Ellen DeGeneres also read for the part.
Oh, thank Christ that didn't happen.
Yeah, and also Rosanna's sister Alexis Arquette plays the gunman emerging from the bathroom. Alexis Arquette was not out as trans then, so she was credited as Robert Arquette. And yes, they are both related to David Arquette. And although I'm not quite sure all the stuff that Rosanna Arquette has been in, but I know Alexis Arquette was the Boy George fanatic keyboard player in The Wedding Singer. We also have Christopher Walken as Captain Coons, Bruce Willis as Butch Coolidge, and at this time, the biggest actor in this movie was Bruce Willis, which is weird seeing how big of a, star Samuel Jackson is. This is like, Samuel Jackson was more on like the rise of his career during this.
Jackson, Walken, Uma Thurman, Travolta. Like, there's some fucking names in here, which is crazy to think about the idea that, like, Bruce Willis was the cell.
Yeah, I mean, because Travolta's career, after a few bombs, especially like Look Who's Talking Look Who's Talking Now, which was terrible. Yeah, so his career was kind of waning down. And Uma Thurman's and Samuel Jackson's was, emerging up. What's really funny is that this isn't the first film that Bruce Willis and John Travolta were in together. That was Look Who's Talking and Look Who's Talking 2, where Bruce Willis voices a infant child.
Okay.
If you remember those movies.
Shit, no. Shit, no.
See. Oh, and Tarantino plays Jimmy, which we will get to that. I think that's basically the main people that I
kinda, yeah, I think you nailed it.
Yeah. Oh, I guess Tim Roth's character was also almost cast with Johnny Depp was almost cast for the role, or Christian Slater, and in an early development, Tarantino contemplated casting Tim Roth as Vincent and Gary Oldman as Jules. Sorry. Due to originally writing the characters two English guys. But that's really all I got on cast.
Silence is good for podcasts.
Oh, absolutely. Tarantino said he filmed this on 50 ASA stock, which is the slow stock that they made. The reason why he used this because he wanted to create an almost no grain image, and it was the closest thing that he had to 50's Technicolor, which we talked about Technicolor when we reviewed Suspiria. That, and also this movie has no film score and uses an assortment of surf music, rock and roll, soul, and pop songs, including Dick Dale's rendition of Misery Lou, and what Xenon Mike said was that song by Death Grips, when it's actually Rumble.
It's Death Grips.
Well, yeah. That being said, I think it is time for plot.
Okay, so it's a difficult one to explain because there's a lot of interaction between characters, but essentially everything kind of ties down towards this, like, crime ring, I guess, is the best way to put it. You follow a couple different characters through, like, a 2 or 3 day stretch. But it all happens in a very strange order. There's different ties that different people have to the same crime ring that all kind of come back through the same place. We'll get into it a little bit in likes and dislikes, honestly, because it's a difficult plot to describe without going completely chronologically when the story doesn't happen chronologically. Yeah.
And on top of that, there isn't necessarily like a plot per se, because this is kind of like an anthology film where each segment intertwines with all other segments in some way or another.
So that's one of my big takeaways for likes, right? Is the idea that like in any 15-20 minute segment of this movie, you can find its own plot line, its own short film, right? It can act independently of everything else. It doesn't matter that you know any of the characters or what's going on in the other parts of the movie or the other parts of this crime ring, right? In this one little 20-minute section, everything is homogenous. You know all of the things that you need to know for this section, right? But the idea that like by the end of the movie, you've recognized what parts come first, what parts come in the middle, what parts come in the end, and you can kind of take these anthologies and follow people's lives through the course of this 3-day stretch, right?
Right.
It's presented in the way that it is, it kind of keeps you entertained, right? You meet Tim Roth's character as like a pre-title sequence, right? And like, you kind of forget that he fucking exists until the very end of the movie, but in a way that's kind of constructive, because then when it comes back to the diner scene and you hear some of the dialogue, you're like, oh shit, here we go again. And you've really like tied the whole thing together.
And even the fact that like Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer are barely in this, like their little like bookend segments are really good.
Well, I think it's just like you mentioned, there isn't one cohesive plot, right? If they were to rearrange this movie and make it in a chronological order, you'd be like, why the fuck am I watching this, right? But every piece of it independently manages to find a way to keep you entertained despite no one overarching purpose. I think the anthology thing is actually kind of cool and very positive for Pulp Fiction. Not to knock it entirely, but it's absolutely a film student's wet dream, you know? Like, 100%.
Yeah. Especially cinematography wise. Like, I know that we kind of said that some of the cinematography was a little like, I mean, it was really good in Reservoir Dogs, but we said like there were a few things that were a little shaky. With this, I think Tarantino definitely nails it. Cinematography wise.
There are some weird decision-making processes with cinematography, but I think it's less noticeable, which overall I think you have to call a success, right? Like, Reservoir Dogs has some very weird ones that very much stand out, right? In the first time that we meet the dudes in suits, I'm gonna call them, because they never really get a title for being the badasses, right? Like, dudes in suits. They like some of the camera angles down the hallway and the decision to make that conversation last as long as it did is like it's a really interesting choice, but it doesn't feel egregious where it stands out to you that like, why would you film it this way, you idiot? Like I think that there's some it's easier to ignore when there are questionable decisions, and I think overall you have to believe that that's more successful than Reservoir Dogs, even for as good as we gave it credit for in the last one.
Yeah, especially when we gave it credit for like character work. Like, to me, like, I think what really makes this movie is the characters.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And the dialogue between the characters.
For sure.
We talked about like how like Michael Madsen, it was kind of difficult to pinpoint like, is he like just a raging psychopath, or is he actually thinking things through? And this is just him being a psychopath just happens to go to these conclusions. There's like a lot of like not fleshed outness with it, but it seems like even the minor characters in this movie are fleshed out.
Well, and when they don't flesh them out, right? Like at least they give them some depth. It's not they're not just like throwaway NPC type characters, right? Like there's
even some of the background characters, like the lady with the bong, while they're like trying to revive Uma Thurman, she's just standing there with like the bong, like, ooh, this is interesting. I've never seen an adrenaline shot before.
Right. Yeah, like I say, I think that there are, like, I would argue that Travolta's character is one of the least like flushed out characters, and they still give him a backstory that like everything that happens is purposeful, right? That like even the places they don't give you details, you feel like you're not missing anything, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I totally agree. I will say this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to on your point, like where the thing that makes this movie is the characters, right? I think you could make arguments that a lot of the characters in this movie, or a lot of the actors, have some of their best roles in smaller parts. Like, I don't know that this is Samuel L. Jackson's best acting job ever, right?
No, it's not, but it's pretty damn good.
Well, but it's a hell of a performance for a smaller role, right? Like I'm not here to say he's never acted better, because I think the acting necessarily wasn't strong, right? But the character.
I mean, it's basically Samuel L. Jackson doing a Samuel L. Jackson impression, but
right, but it's the character is good enough that you feel good about Samuel L. Jackson's performance, and I think that there's a lot of characters you can say that about, right? Like even what's his face, who's I don't think you mentioned him in the cast list, but he was Buddy Holly in the restaurant, and I can't think of his name.
Oh shit!
Yeah, I can't. Why can't his name come to me?
Christ.
The notoriously ugly Hollywood actor. Why? Oh man, it's gonna drive me insane. Anyway, like they give him 2 sentences. He never looks up. If not for his voice, you wouldn't even be able to tell that it was him, right? But like,
oh, and I also forgot the guy that plays Marvin is Phil LaMarr from fucking Mad TV, which is weird because this is before Mad TV. How the hell do you go from Pulp Fiction and go, yeah, I'm gonna be in Mad TV now?
It's just good TV, man. I don't know what to tell you. But like I say, I mean, they give him 2 sentences, right? Like he just has to take an order in a diner, right? And like, you can still feel the apathy weighing off that character, that this is just a shit job after his fucking college where he's going to save some money, right? Like he doesn't even give you that background, but you absolutely get the vibe, right? Characters that just don't matter. You feel like you're not missing anything.
Oh my god, that's Steve Buscemi.
Yes, it is Steve Buscemi. Thank you for mentioning his name. Are you just now learning this?
Yeah, I didn't notice it.
Sweet Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's Steve Buscemi. I'm pretty sure I said that while we were watching yesterday, too. Anyway.
Oh, and I forgot, Kathy Griffin does make an appearance on this as like a bystander.
Uh-huh. Yeah, everybody and their grandmother's in this fucking movie. In fact, you watching this, your grandmother is in this movie. Surprise. No, I do think, though, that there are a lot of characters that, like, the character building and the acting towards that built character is really good, right? Like I mentioned, so John Travolta, right? I don't think that he is a superb actor in this film, right? But I think the character is good, and Travolta does a good enough job looking like he's dazed and confused all the fucking time. Like, the character building is really good that makes you feel like it's good acting performances, even when you can, like, take a step back and recognize that, maybe it wasn't that good acting, but, like, the characters are built well.
And honestly, what's funny is that the Tarantino cameo doesn't seem forced like it does in Reservoir Dogs, you know?
Instead of forcing his cameo, he forces a 4-minute conversation on feet so he can jerk off to his own fucking movie. He's disgusting. Anyway.
Which he does not do. It's John Travolta and
yeah, he doesn't participate in the conversation, but that's so he can be off scene stroking his dick and he doesn't need to act through it.
There's a couple conversations that are exactly like Jesus Christ Tarantino, like come on.
Multiple times.
Which we'll probably get into dislikes, but which to me, like I said, like, you know, the dialogue's the best part. I will say that there are some parts of the dialogue I'm kind of meh about.
Oh, I'll get there.
Yeah,
I'll get there.
Unless you have more likes.
Yeah. So I mentioned this was a film student's wet dream, right?
Yes.
And the one thing in particular about that particular comment that stands out to me is that there's like weird humor in this, right? So the one scene that stands out in particular, right, is Christopher Walken telling this 6-year-old fucking kid about the ass watch, right? And like,
it's the gold watch. No, it's the ass watch.
It's the ass watch. But it's not like a comedy movie kind of funny, right? Like he's genuinely telling a war story about the 4 generations that brought it to him, right? And the funny part isn't necessarily your father and I both had this watch up our ass. It's all yours, kid, right? Because like, yeah,
it's the fact the kid just grabs it without any questioning.
No, the funny part is where the story leads off with your great grandfather decided this was his lucky watch. He gave it to your dad. and your dad died at war handing it to a stranger, right? So the luck's instantaneously gone. Then it goes to the little kid's
grandfather
dad.
The grandfather dies too. It's the great-grandfather's the one that...
Right, the great-grandfather says it's my lucky watch, gives it to the grandfather. Grandfather dies to give the watch to some stranger who delivers it to the kid's dad, right? The father then has this watch in a fucking can, goes to war, has to shove it up his ass in a prisoner of war camp for 5 years so that he can shove it up his buddy's ass as his dying act, right? And then pass it on to the kid. And then you get introduced to the kid as an adult who murders a dude in a boxing ring and has to run for his life. Like, it is the unlucky watch, but the funny part, like the film student kind of comedy and all of that, is that it was prefaced with, this was your great-grandfather's lucky watch. That's funny as shit, but it's not comedy haha funny. And I very much appreciate the way that Tarantino writes jokes for filmmakers, not for the common audience, but he disguises it with jokes for the common audience. It's intelligent and I love it.
And continuing on, commenting on Samuel Jackson's acting, the scene where, like, Tarantino's yelling at him and stuff, like, normally that would be kind of cringe, because, like, he is yelling the N-word at Samuel Jackson. But the funny thing is that Samuel Jackson, you can tell that he's trying not to laugh, so he keeps on, like, drinking his coffee to, like, hide his smirk. Yeah. And I have to say, like, that's brilliant, like,
it's
being able to use a...
It's like when they called Norm Macdonald the comedian for comedians, right? Like, I feel like Tarantino's doing the same thing in this movie, is he's telling jokes to the people who are filmmakers or to film students and not necessarily to everybody. It's layered, but it's really good. Moving into dislikes, though, you mentioned that Tarantino using the N-word at Samuel L. Jackson, right? The last one felt like there was a place in the movie and there was a purpose, right? And it wasn't like we justified it, but like we understood. This one, there's not even an understanding. This one is just egregiously, he wanted to write the N-word on a script a few times, including a character he gave to himself. Tarantino, not so closeted racist. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. And to be honest, like, watching these movies, like, beforehand, I'm like, I wonder if Spike Lee's actually kind of, like, overreacted. But watching these two, it's like, no, I think Spike Lee had a point, and Tarantino's, like, white characters excessively using the N-word,
Yeah. Especially when he gives the line to himself. That's the really part that, like, okay, dude, you had to write it. Not okay, but fine. And then he gives himself the character.
If it wasn't for Samuel Jackson trying not to laugh through that entire tirade, I would have felt so damn uncomfortable.
I did. I felt uncomfortable anyway, man. It was just egregiously unnecessary.
Ugh.
Anyway, the dialogue.
What I'm saying is I got distracted, so that way I could tune it out.
Fair. The dialogue is something else that you mentioned that I kind of want to go back to for dislikes. There are several pieces of dialogue that are very good, right? Samuel L. Jackson's scene in the apartment where, do he look like a bitch? And he's just shouting, right? Like, that's incredibly good dialogue.
Speak it.
Everything in there feels like exactly human, right? Because
especially at the end with, like, the wall. It's like, which wallet's yours? The one that says "badass motherfucker."
You're right. If somebody is threatening me with a gun, right, and they tell me, "Say what again? What does he look like?" I'm not going to tell the black guy that the first descriptor I have is that he's black. The second one, being bald, is probably not the most apt description. And then, does he look like a bitch? Of course I'm going to say what? I'm getting shot there, and I know it, right? Like, it feels incredibly human. However, there are several places in this movie where it feels like Tarantino has never had a conversation with another living human. There are several points where, like, this is how you speak to other people. This is why you have to cast yourself.
Thing, which felt awkward. The fucking foot fetish thing was awkward.
Well, not even like the foot fetish thing is again, Tarantino, get over the fucking feet. but like at least they're having a conversation in a way that sounds like normal people would have a conversation. I don't have any specific examples to pull from here, right? But there are several places that it's like, yeah, you've never interacted with a human. This is why you have to cast yourself into a movie, because you can't talk to anybody else to audition them. Like it's not the way real people talk to each other. And I think it sticks out pretty egregiously in a few spots.
Yeah, another thing that I kind of have a gripe with is like when Butch, who is Bruce Willis's character, goes up to Vincent Vega, John Travolta's character, and John Travolta's just like overtly hostile to him for no fucking reason. It's like, I'm not your friend, Palooka, and it's like, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like there's no reason behind it. The only thing I could think of is like, is Tarantino implying that he knows that Bruce Willis has full intent on screwing over Marcellus?
There's a weird like line with purpose here, right? And like why things were written into the movie, right? So like in the Bruce Willis, in his last scene, right, where he and Marcellus are kidnapped by the store owner after fighting each other, right? Like the purpose behind it's also a sexual assault with a cop seems kind of unnecessary, right? Like obviously it's there needs to be some event that happens so that he and Marcellus like resolve their beef, right? And I get that. But like the idea for it to be sexual assault is a weird place to cross. The man that they pull out of the box in the gimp suit just to hang him without any lines, right? Again, why? Like there are several things that like okay, as much as I appreciate the fact that the ass watch was in there, right? The movie doesn't change without the ass watch. The only thing that changes is the idea that he has to go back to his apartment to pick it up, and that's when he runs into Marcellus. If they didn't write him a wife and he was just fleeing town, they could have done the same goddamn thing, right? So the entire section about the ass watch becomes irrelevant, right? There's a whole lot of like, what's the purpose, Tarantino? That I just I don't get. You could have probably cut down half an hour to 45 minutes of this movie with the purposeless weird shit, right? And I'm not complaining because all of it has its value to watch, right? I'm not saying you should cut it. But it does leave that question of like, okay, but why?
Yeah, and there are sometimes like, okay, but why does work, especially with like why does like Marcellus have like a cut beneath his like
on his neck,
like,
yeah,
on his neck. If I remember right, he just had a scratch there, but like for whatever reason Tarantino just decided to put focus into that, and since they don't show what's in the briefcase, people always like made the assumption that was Marcellus's soul that's in the briefcase. That was actually proven false because in early drafts of the script, it's actually just diamonds in the briefcase, which led to another fan theory because since spoiler alert,
Reservoir Dogs stole the diamonds.
Tarantino's films. What?
I said Reservoir Dogs stole the diamonds. Yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
But
which that hasn't been confirmed or denied, but I think it was just diamonds. But I do think it does make the MacGuffin of the briefcase more interesting that you don't know what's in it.
I mean, that's kind of fair. I'll give you that.
You just know it's nice and shiny.
But yeah, I mean, the why of the Band-Aid, right? Like, they could have done without it, right? But then, like, also they decide to lean into it, right? And the idea that, like, the first 6 times you meet Marcellus, like, you never see his face, you identify him from the Band-Aid on the back of his head, right? That, like, it's a wide decision, but it kind of gives some function later on, and it's, a reasonably small choice. But like, you could have skipped 4 minutes of Christopher Walken's soliloquy about your father shoved this watch up his ass and then I shoved this watch up my ass and here's your ass watch, right? Like, it just there's a whole lot of why. I would love to just, okay, why this the whole damn movie with Tarantino, but I don't want to sit and talk to him that long because I'll probably hear about feet.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you'll definitely hear something about feet. That being said, I don't really have a hell of a lot of dislikes besides what I've said, besides like some uncomfortable fucking dialogue just because, some of it's cringe. And then also, like you said, some of it's cringe because that's not how people interact. But yet, there's other times where the dialogue's just super awesome, even if some cases where it doesn't, it's just there for like whatever goddamn reason. Like, again, the ass watch, like I'm glad it's there, but it doesn't need to be there.
I think the only other real dislike I have is the miseducation about drug use, right? Like, it feels under-researched, first of all, right?
Right.
I fun fact, I work in a drug addiction treatment center, right? Like, I'm not unaware of what happens with average drug use, right? But like, I also recognize that there are some fallacies, some inconsistencies, some things that are not necessarily safe to broadcast to an audience this large, right? If you have
so we're not supposed to be ejecting people in their chests with the fucking adrenaline needles?
Right? Yeah, their Narcan nasal spray is available over the counter at every pharmacy in the country, right? Like, you don't need a 14-inch fucking needle to get stabbed through your breastplate because that's how you kill people, right? It's a nasal spray, I promise. Like, there are easier ways to go about it, right?
Of course, I don't know if Narcan was around there back then.
Even still, right? Like, I think that there are things that are dangerous to communicate, right? Like, even if that like, I know that Narcan only became over the counter within the past couple of months. I understand, right? But like, the idea that like, hey, everyone who's ever snorted even a little bit of heroin dies unless you have a 14-inch needle in your fridge. Like, no, we can do a better job than that. I promise. Telling people that you should.
Jim Morrison reference because the official cause of death was a heart attack, but there was no autopsy done, and there's rumors that he thought like his girlfriend's heroin was cocaine and just did lines of it and then overdosed.
Well, and that's that's the other part too, right? Is that like they didn't. I know it's not Tarantino's responsibility, so I don't necessarily want to call this a negative, right? But like, I personally think in order to dispel drug use or to dissuade against drug use, right? Like, you should also probably give people real information instead. You snort this once and you'll instantaneously die is not quite real. Again, it's not Tarantino's responsibility, but I also think that if you're going to make drug use a significant part of your film, you should at least do it in a way that's like honest, realistic, or doesn't have the wrong life-saving advice to give to people. But
especially since he puts so much detail in everything else.
Yeah, you watch him actually like, here's how you take heroin, you melt it down and then you put it in the needle, and this is how you inject yourself with a needle, and this is how, like, nope. No, we shouldn't be showing people this to then fuck it up and teach people the wrong things. That bothers the shit out of me. But again, I digress. I know it's not Tarantino's responsibility, but like, just don't put out misinformation or things that are unsafe for people. Just throwing that out there.
I do have one more like.
Sure.
Now, I know that it's not all the case where the music is like, not is diegetic or non-diegetic. There's some non-diegetic music there. At least I think I got like the terms right. If I'm right, diegetic music is when you know where the source of the music comes from. I like how a lot of the music you can actually like maybe pinpoint the source. There's ones where it's directly you can pinpoint the source because it's from like a record or like a tape.
I genuinely think it's everywhere except when they leave the diner at the very end of the movie.
And even then you could say, well, it could have just came over the radio on the diner.
The only reason I disagree with that is because there was silence through the beginning of the scene. It wouldn't be silent into loud music when nobody was moving. That's the only reason I'll disagree, but I think it's the only place you can't directly explain the music from within the movie.
Right. And if there's are cases where you're not entirely sure, you can actually deduce that that's the case. With that, if you have nothing else to say, I guess rankings.
Yep. I'll let you have at it.
So, normally I would always say that Reservoir Dogs is a better movie than Pulp Fiction because Uh, shall we say songs like Smoke on the Water and Stairway to Heaven, once you kind of like see, you listen to like a really good song, you kind of learn, you hear it over and over and over. Actually, the best example is Radiohead's Creep. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad song, but I can go the rest of my life without, listening to Creep. And I was that way with Pulp Fiction for a long, long time. And I was just like, there's other Tarantino films, and I always point out Reservoir Dogs. It's like, you should watch Reservoir Dogs. Like, come on. Like, it's like Pulp Fiction gets all the freaking glory, and it's like, but Reservoir Dogs is so much better. But after rewatching both, I'm also going to put Pulp Fiction above Reservoir Dogs, just because I think it's just executed better.
Man, this one's tough. I like.
Oh, it is tough. It is tough because
they're both really good in their own respect. I think the only reason that I'm going to put Reservoir Dogs first is because
everybody loves a heist.
No, not even that. Because you don't even get the heist elements of the heist movie, dude. That's
all right.
That's frustrating. No, I think that, like, if you really boil it down, right, Reservoir Dogs had a plot, right? Where not to say that, like, Pulp Fiction has a ton of, like, smaller, tiny plots, right? And it is an enjoyable film, right? But if you really sit down and boil it, like, why are you watching the whole movie instead of 3 20-minute episodes? You know what I mean? Like, it just the purpose-driven aspect of it, right? Like, fucking it. I don't know how to do this without spoiling, right? But, like, the idea that Vincent, right? The opening scene, like, they're going to, like, be the thugs, be the muscle, right? Then you watch him take the boss's wife on a date, which, what the fuck is that, man? Entertain yourselves with the television or your cocaine habits, right? But he takes her out, and then there's the date, right? And then there's this scene where, like, he blows somebody's brains out by accident, which is, again, why?
Which I have to say is my favorite scene in the movie. Is like, I should have shot Marvin in the face.
Right.
Like, why the fuck did you do that? I don't know.
And then they
I didn't know fucking ball.
Well, but then they just kind of, like, his death is just kind of like, he doesn't get a line. He falls backwards, a bloody bullet-riddled mess, into a bathtub, right? And, like, as you start to watch it, you're like, all right, well, why did we get 3 different plots and 3 different, like, large chunks of this movie to have him just die kind of meaninglessly, right? And, like,
right.
And I think that whole, like, all right, well, what did I spend all of this time watching for instead of just, like, actually as an anthology rather than one cohesive piece, right? I think that's why I have to pick Reservoir Dogs, but I'm telling you, it's close. They're both fantastic films.
Yeah, like, what I say, like, I think the character work is better in Pulp Fiction, while the plot's better in Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, that's
to me. I just think Pulp Fiction itself is cinematography wise is better shot.
Yeah, my guess is that as we go through this series, like, Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction are going to stay right next to each other the entire time. They're both very good films, just very different from each other.
Yeah, I agree. Hold on, I gotta see which one's next.
True.
But
it's not Kill Bill already, is it?
No.
I was pretty sure there was something in between.
I think it's Jackie Brown, but I'm not entirely. Yeah, it's Jackie Brown. Then it's Kill Bill.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you guys for watching. We appreciate you. As always, if you're interested in more of these, we've got 4 different series of these now between Bond and Halloween and Kubrick and Christopher Nolan and now Tarantino. So yeah, we've got 4 full series of these. You can go watch them, check out the rest of the YouTube, or come check us out on Twitch. Stallman at Traductus and myself at Ted Green Eagles. If you're catching this one early enough, we're still watching movies every single week in the Discord on Monday nights now, not Tuesday nights anymore. It's Mondays. Schedule change. So feel free to hop on in and hang out and watch some movies with us.
A good way to spend the Mondays.
Exactly. What better to do? All right. But as always, thank you guys for watching. We will see you here next week. Adios.